welcome to Karo 2023, and welcome you all to the roundtable discussion on unlocking financing to revolutionize electric bus adoption. So before starting the roundtable discussion, we'll go through a brief context setting on how is the bus industry and how the electrification of public transport is happening in India, and what are the kind of challenges that we are facing to scale up the national ambitions, and briefly discuss on few case studies how the funding has been tackled and what are the financial challenges, and discussion on the challenges and the kind of policy interventions that are required. So currently, India has about 17 lakh buses on the roads as on March 2023, out of which nearly 1.5 lakh buses are public buses which are operated by various public transport agencies, STUs, and the ridership is nearly about 7 crore passengers, which is kind of 3 times the railways carriage. And based on kind of a secondary analysis, we know that the current capacity of the industry to produce buses are about 75,000 to 80,000 per year, which is a good sign that we are moving in a right direction on this. After the launch of FAME 1, so there is an exponential increase in the number of buses that has been added in India, and we have seen how the response for Grand Challenge and onto the FAME 2 scheme and all. And we are aiming for India is kind of second largest bus industry in the world, and we are trying to achieve the high degree of localization, battery manufacturing capability being set up, and obviously the growth is driven by the FAME-led incentives, where OEMs are directly involved through the public procurement. What are the kind of policy initiatives that has been taken for the e-bus deployment in India? Since 2013, when the National Electric Mobility Mission Plan was launched, and the FAME 1 scheme has really accelerated that adoption. Though the allocation under FAME 1 was little less, but after that we realized that outright purchase model is not working, and we are moved to the PPP model. And after that subsequently the Grand Challenge, which took the whole procurement to the next level, where 5,500 buses have been tendered out on a single tender as an aggregation model. Subsequent to that, based on the lessons from Grand Challenge, the National Electric Bus Program was launched with a target of 50,000 buses by 2030. And currently, already 6,500 buses have been already tendered out under the NEBP program. So what does the NEBP program say to us? We have an ambitious target of 50,000 buses by 2030, and obviously, the grand success of Grand Challenge, the unique approach for the demand aggregation and kind of homogenizing the standards and all those things really kind of discovered the lowest ever rates that an e-bus operation can get. And that really bolstered the confidence, not only for the government, but also industry kind of, this is a way forward to do kind of aggregate the demand and tender out. This program obviously enables, private operators to procure and finance electric buses without the need for any upfront capital from the government. So as I said, currently 6,500 buses have been already tendered out, meeting the demand for about 6 public transport agencies. And the prices determined were nearly 19 to 24% lower compared to their, CNG and diesel counterparts. This is even without subsidies. And the second tender under NEBP, which is kind of a dry lease, where certain STUs have asked for dry lease because they have their own staff where they want buses and they want to operate on their own. So 4,675 buses have been aggregated already, and I think the tender is in advanced stage. So what is the kind of the e-bus procurement requirement by 2035? So currently, with the current demand, if you see we have about 1 lakh buses deficit, and if you compare with the fleet aging that is currently happening in the STUs, we require about 1.5 lakh buses, and totally we require about 2.5 public buses alone actually. And if you really add up private buses also, which is about another 7 lakh buses, and totaling about 9.5 lakh buses that are required by 2035 to meet the public transport demand in the country. And obviously, we have a commitment of EV 30, which has been last SEM, which happened in 2017, and we'll be eagerly waiting for what is the announcement going to happen in the next SEM that is going to happen in next 2 days. What are the kind of challenges that are there to scale up the national ambitions actually? So if you see the issue, uh, we all know these figures about how the public transport agencies kind of reeling under the lot of pressure in terms of their cost, and there is a huge cost revenue gap. Put together about 26% of the gap that is clearly been seen, and this is data from 2019 and 20. Obviously, COVID has really put some more pressure on that, and currently the numbers would be even more huge. But what are the kind of major reasons that really kind of getting this revenue gap? The older fleet, which kind of consumes a lot of cost for their maintenance and operations, revenue constraints in terms of deploying the technology solutions for efficiency, and obviously the fuel cost has been increased multifold, human resource cost also kind of adding to it, and obviously the fare revision is not happening time to time to kind of match with the kind of cost they are putting in. What are the kind of funding and financing challenges to scale up this, in terms of, as I said, insufficient fare box revenue, and support to STUs generally kind of, if you see now, the support from the state government is kind of ad hoc actually. It's kind of not institutionalized to meet these gaps, and obviously even in terms of the subsidy that they have to receive generally get delayed. So that those are the kind of major funding challenges that we can see, and obviously the financing challenges are even more broader. Uh, the recourse based on corporate financing, the commercial lending in the form of corporate debt can be taken on balance sheet of OEM operator, but that is, there are several limitations to that, and there is no access to low cost long term financing. The current financing terms are basically 6 to 7 years, but we are talking about 10 to 12 years of contracts under electric buses. And credit history of STUs is a major challenge still, given that there is a huge gap between the revenues and the costs they are incurring. And if we list down, what are the kind of major challenges that are kind of foreseen for NEBP demand is basically, we are kind of targeting 50,000 buses, which will require around 80,000 crores of capital investment for this, and NEBP alone will require 60,000 crores, and in terms of debt, and 20,000 crores for equity investment, and obviously debt cannot be raised against the balance sheet of operators, and obviously the project finance is required, and which in turns the viability gap is estimated around 7,000 to 10,000 crores annually, and to be kind of structured across various states, and obviously a national level policy support is required to meet this gap. Let's look at two case studies that we want to showcase the successful, as we see now. One is the Gujarat Chief Minister Urban Bus Scheme, where it has helped various cities to start operating city bus services. Before the scheme, there were only 8 cities that were operating buses. Now there are about 17 cities that added city bus services in the smaller cities also, and about 1,300 buses are being operationalized under this VGF scheme. And given that this is a consistent and adequate financial support, cities could able to actually foresee what kind of demand they have, and they can easily plan what kind of bus system they require. And on top of this, cities are going to receive either 50% or 25 rupees per kilometer for the electric buses actually, against 12.5 rupees per kilometer for the CNG buses actually. But however, the cities have to put their equivalent share also in this. But still, this is a kind of great model to emulate, to kind of support cities or STUs to kind of operate electric buses actually. One more, at the national level, we all maybe some of us already know about this, the SECI model, where to accelerate the renewable energy, they set up Solar Energy Corporation of India, which is now being called as REGI, Renewable Energy Corporation of India, which was set up in 2011, has been really a game changer for the growth that witnessed in the power sector, renewable energy power sector, where SECI directly issues RFPs for establishing the power projects on build, own, operate basis, and the successful bidders enter into an long-term power agreement with SECI. Simultaneously, where SECI and various state buying utilities enter into a back-to-back power sale agreements, and this is a kind of example model where we can understand like what are the pros and cons in this, and see like how we can actually translate this into accelerating electric bus adoption in India. How do we overcome these financial barriers, and a few discussion points on the challenges and the policy interventions. So today I would like to invite the esteemed speakers here to kind of the discussion will be revolving around these key guiding questions, where like what is the kind of current demand, as we already see the numbers, there is a huge demand that is there. If you can put up the numbers, the demand will go up to 10 lakhs, also 1 million buses. But what is the kind of current demand for e-buses across the country, and what is the kind of expected growth? What are the challenges in terms of raising debt for these electric bus projects, and how can we learn lessons from other sectors to apply, as we are showing in the SECI model and all, and to grow this meet the demand that is growing in the country, and to identify various policy interventions, and to catalyze the private capital in the sector, and their expected impact on the project financing, and how should the market mature to ensure the competition and facilitate equity and debt capital for the e-bus sector. So these are the kind of key guiding questions that we can navigate our discussions today. But still we are open to kind of any more points to be added in terms of how we kind of finance the electric buses to accelerate the deployment, as we see that there is we have actually leapfrogged in terms of to put electric buses on the ground, but still more work is required, and finance is a major thing. Obviously the good thing is recent announcement of Indo-US joint announcement on the PSM for 10,000 buses, which is kind of going to fuel this whole deployment. So on this background, I would request Mr. Pawan Mulukutla to moderate this session to navigate the discussion around these guiding questions. Thank you.
Very good afternoon to everyone here. I think most of them are friends here who we have been discussing this topic for a decade now on financing. And I think this is probably the fourth or fifth such discussion this year alone, where we are talking about what do we do for financing of buses. We had CNG buses, now we have electric buses. The problem hasn't really moved. So I don't think I really have anything new to really say, there is a magic wand which I will be able to say, okay, this is the solution we have. I think there's a good combination of experts. I mean, we have Laghu from World Bank, so hopefully World Bank can roll out some solutions here, and others as well. But I think, sir, it will be good if you moderate this discussion, I feel.
I was about to say that you had 4 or 5 rounds of discussion in the last or up to now in this year itself. So do you want more questions, or you want to answer those questions which you heard in last 4 or 5 sessions? So
No, I think we want to at least hopefully develop a solution, right?
yeah, I think that should be the approach.
So my request is, why don't you moderate this session? Because I think for us, it is more of us to learn and, see how do we really bring this out. We know that payment security last, I think in May was talked about. I'll just share some highlights, and I think Sumit and others were also there in that discussion, wherein we talked about how do surplus states like Delhi and Telangana really address the payment security mechanism at the state level. So I think it's for the benefit of the whole audience. Also, I think some of you had attended that discussion on how do we mitigate different risks for companies that are lending. I think it really came down to that, and some of the mechanisms that was talked about was a short-term PSM and a long-term PSM as one of the options. But how do we really mitigate the risk? And will be good to hear from some of the folks who are working in this space on what actually matters. I think we'll jump into discussion.
I think what we can do is that we have a good mix of people who are actually manufacturing buses, and they would like to sell. But the point is, they would like to sell, but why they are not able to sell, and why the demand is not picking up. So I think we don't have a magic wand. So basically, if you want to have something, you have to pay for it. and I think there must have been some mismatch of what they are willing to, like for what they are willing to operate the bus and the amount of money which they are thinking they will get. I think there is some big gap. And as you said, I don't know how many discussion you will require to actually come to a solution. But I think it would be good idea to understand. Like I think we know that, but at least again to refresh memories, including my own memories, that what are the key problems. And I think with that, then we can switch to, actually you should also have STUs, because see, you have a lot of, say, financiers and manufacturers, but ultimately those agencies which are interested in buying the product, they also have to say how they are going to finance it. So I think, but we can begin with, I think we have Nishant, we have Achal, and then we have many others, and then we can switch to PS. And we also understand that the contracts for bus operation, because I think essentially we are talking about long-term contract, because earlier the buses were on, like all STUs used to operate on, they used to own buses, they used to recruit drivers, conductors, all staff. Now with these electric buses, I think the preferred mode of operation for many of the STUs is to have GCC contract. Now GCC contract is very different. Like you perform and then you get paid for the whatever kilometers you put in on the road. So I think the whole dynamics has changed, because if suppose even if the bus cost a crore or so, then like STUs could have either taken loan on their balance sheet or finance. But now I think the financing mechanism itself has changed, and STUs are happy because they don't have to borrow that much. Somebody else is borrowing, but ultimately it's not going to come free. So I think, so this whole the contract being 10 to 12 years, so the risk involved there and the PSM which is being offered, so I think it has to match. Otherwise, uh, I think manufacturers will be in better position to respond. But if you are offering a short term PSM versus the long term nature of the contract, how do you address those gaps? I think that's also a very important question. So I think, why don't we start from here?
So I'll just say, as I think in the interest of time also, we have exactly 70 more minutes. So I would also request all speakers to just come very specifically to what can be done. So Nishant, why don't we start with you?
So, I think, sir, you've raised a very pertinent point, and you have been part of the whole value chain yourself also. So, you understand it very well. I think the only challenge today is, I would say, few things. In terms of the pipeline of projects, I think if that becomes clear from all STUs for next 2 to 3 years, that gives a clear understanding what is there to come. And all STUs have replacement as well as augmentation requirements for enhancing the penetration of buses. And secondly, as we have been discussing for last couple of years and even longer around the payment security mechanism, so a SECI like model is very robust, and it has been proven for the last 12 years, and that is one of the key reasons for the solar sector to scale up. So if something like that can be created, where a national body is there which is tying up with STUs, and for all operational reasons, even today, and we are a solar IPP also, so we experience that on the other side also. So you have all the operational parameters being agreed between the IPP and the discoms. So similar thing with STUs, and uh, different gross cost contracts can be executed, and this mechanism would actually bring in a very high level of stability and a long term commitment from the gross cost contract mobility companies. Thirdly, I think what is essential is that today the routes keep changing, that things perspective comes in certain cases, specifically where buses are deployed, and number of kilometers and other things don't get standardized. But in the case of NEBP and CSL, they have got standardized to a large extent. I think asset utilization is the key in certain cases. How we can bring in efficiencies towards asset utilization, which will drive down the cost, especially with electric buses, is something which we need to drive a bit more. And if certain parameters can be drawn around it, which everybody can adapt, that would make it even more competitive. So another point comes across the uh, we talk about the battery prices and other things, right? But everywhere we see that across different parts. If you see today, I would say Singapore has come up with certain tenders in the past, and a few other countries. But if you read, I always see Singapore document as the global benchmark today, and there, if you'll see, they talk about the energy density, they talk about the battery performance, safety, so all such issues don't come. So it's not that we are using cheap batteries which last for a few years and all those kind of things, because these are long term contracts. So for any financial institution also, they would like the quality of the product which they are funding to be excellent. So one has to see that whether from a mobility company standpoint, STU standpoint, nodal agency standpoint, banking standpoint, you're addressing each and every stakeholder holistically. So the product as well as the contract needs to be bankable from that standpoint, so that makes it very robust. Plus a ecosystem perspective rather than only buses. So how the power infra, charging infrastructure, the maintenance, and everything gets captured in a gross cost contract. But I think the readiness of different STUs is different across the country everywhere, how the power infrastructure is available, how things are happening in time, because of which also we see at times contracts don't get executed, or even if they get executed, they are not in the best of shapes which we would look forward to. I think these are few points from my side in this case. Plus another thing is that we see that different kinds of buses, different kinds of features come up across different cities because they have different requirements. I think if the scoping can be done there also, and the features and the structures can be put in place, so there is a pool of knowledge which is available from which people can pick, and random points don't come in, which is difficult for GCC or manufacturing companies like ours. So just few points from my side, sir. Thank you.
So you mentioned about the Seki, but is that the only model, or you have some other alternatives, or have you thought about something else which can substitute that? And I think for WR also, you can tweak the buses a little bit, and but I think it doesn't really matter. So actually, you can study the kind of buses different contracts have been specified, and many times the specifications are, unless genuinely justified, to either to exclude or include. And I think those standardization actually can help in a long way, like in the sense like then every manufacturer knows that this is kind of the buses which are going to be in the bid. So I think.
Thank you. Anchal, you want to come in?
So I think one thing that I wanted to add to what Nishant said was the infrastructure being in place. So to give you an example, Tesla is one of the biggest EVs that we all know of, and it's extremely popular. So having spent some time in the US, if you go on the West Coast in California, almost everybody has a Tesla, and you can drive to a national park in a Tesla for 5-6 hours because they've put an electric charging point everywhere. Whereas in the East Coast, there is almost no Tesla visible just because there is no charging point. Now, one of the biggest milestones we have to achieve for EV adoption is that infrastructure for chargeability, for depots, for charging points, and so on. So if we have a common infrastructure that everybody can rely on, and technology that the states can borrow from each other, or a central organization that can help all of us say ki, acha, you should put a charging point here, this is where it should be, planning of the routes, and the cost to put these things is very high. So sharing those things amongst different either operators or different STUs and so on, that can increase the adoption a lot, and they at the same time reduce the cost of all of these things. So what I sometimes feel we are not able to achieve essentially here is economies of scale, because the technology for EV buses and the associate parts is so high that we are not able to scale it up, and वो same cost हर जगह हम repeat कर रहे हैं. So in that sense, some sort of standardization of either, as sir said, the requirements of what it goes in a bus, what the charging point should look like, how the, even for a lot of the localization parts that we are trying to achieve, standardization, working together and getting those done might help us scale down the costs that are associated with the EVs.
Thank you, Anchal. Sumit, let me bring you in. I think just bringing back the discourse to all this, I think problems we all understand, and I don't think we need to really spend time understanding what are the challenges. Before we bring in some experts, I just wanted to really, what has been your experience and bringing really the question back to financing, because we are really talking about 50,000 or 500,000. I think the bus requirement for transition is that. So, what are some of the key challenges that you see, and also probably potential solutions? Because I think we all are good at talking about the challenges, but how do we really address? So, do you have any thoughts from your own learnings?
I'm Sumit and I'm representing Green Cell Mobility. Uh, we as a company, we've raised 2,500 crores of project financing for e-mobility space, right? So while there's been a discussion in terms of Indian lenders have not yet really come up to the level of financing the sector, maybe a lot of them have started doing it. For such a large sector, 2,500 crore is not really a large number, but we've been able to successfully raise it, and we've been doing it for the last 3 years. We operate almost 1,000 buses in the country through government contracts and private contracts, right? See, coming to the crux of the problem, there is going to remain a OPEX gap in the operations, right? The collections in the bus in intracity is not more than 25-30 bucks across the cities, right? And the expectation in terms of fees to be given is around 60-70 rupees depending on which side of contract you're looking at, right? So this gap has to be minimized, right? Once this gap minimizes, right, then the lenders will have far more comfort in being able to kind of underwrite this risk, right? Now there are certain things which are inherent because STUs are also, apart from providing logistics, also have a social commitment of providing a last mile affordable mobility, right? So there is certain part of social commitment which has to be funded by the state, right? But there are a lot of improvements that can be done in the contract itself. A lot of them have been done by CSL, but a lot more are possible. For example, if there is a penalty of 15%, right, which is mandated in the contract, right, majority of the operators, what they will do is, like, when they do the bidding process, right, they will assume 10% or around 10% as their expected penalty, which essentially means in 60 rupees tender, 6 rupees is provisioned for the penalty, right? Now my point is, if the revenue collection in the city is, let's say, 30 bucks, right, and if the rate that we are kind of trying to bid comes closer to 30 rupees, right, then there's absolutely no deficit. There is no need of a payment security mechanism. You can get all the monies in an escrow, and that should be a self-serving kind of a mechanism, right? So our objective should be, how do we reach to a situation where the state burden comes down and this become a kind of a self revenue generating kind of a structure, right? So that's one part of it. Now another important thing is, like, we are talking about electric mobility, but essentially what we are doing is displacing pollution, right? There are thermal power stations which are kind of you getting used in the rural areas, and the electricity is passed on to the urban centers, and we are having a zero tailpipe emission, right? But if we actually want to eradicate pollution, we can move to renewable energy options, right? Now if you see solar or wind, right, the average cost is around 5.5 rupees, right? If you do a group captive kind of an arrangement, right? Whereas if you see the states or the cities where you operate, we spend around 7.5 rupees. So there's another 2.5 rupees which can be shaved off. So the way I am saying is, in that 62 or 65 rupees, which is the ongoing rate, right, if you can keep on shaving these 2 rupees and 6 rupees, right, it will come to a stage where a lender can make an assessment that, okay boss, 80-90% of my payments are coming through the escrow mechanism, right? And through that escrow mechanism, my risk is getting mitigated, right? Similarly, we have talked about this arbitration or the central body, right? See, any kind of a payment security mechanism is a deferment of the problem, right? Because it's kind of essentially a 3 months or a 6 months or at max 1 year kind of a buffer which gets created. And once you draw it down, then again you are at the stage zero, right? So it is a problem which is going to hit you now or maybe 1 year later. I think the crux of the solution is what in the presentation your last point said, right? That SECI has a right to, from RBI, to recover the monies from the state, from the center on behalf of state. Actually, that is the teeth which is given to SECI, which kind of differentiate it from the rest of the other mechanisms, right? We can make anybody as a central body, but if unless until you give him the teeth, right? Then it doesn't work. And just for everybody's understanding, SECI has hardly used this right which it has, right? While the right is there, but just by virtue of having this right, this structure becomes so more potent, right? So I think if I have to summarize my points, one, we should try to reduce this OPEX subsidy in as much as possible scenario, so that the states and the cities become automated. There is a lot of improvement or structuring which is possible in the existing concession agreements, which could make this 2 rupees and 6 rupees go away and kind of come closer to the actual revenue generation. Third is, if we create a payment security mechanism, let's provide it the teeth that SECI has, right? And then I don't think so. Okay, there's a challenge today. The problem is, like, apart from the certain OEMs, right, which have a large balance sheet, most of the operators do not have the ability to kind of raise this kind of a financing on the basis of their own balance sheet, right? And this can only happen if the contract itself is bankable, right? Then it does not require a parent support or a non-recourse financing that we call it in finance, right? It can be possible. So these are my few points. Which just one, Pawan, one thing. When we think about financing, we should also think about equity investors, right? Any sector could only grow if if you're talking about like 50,000 crores of debt, right? There's another 20,000 crores of equity which is required for that, right? Now, unless and until we provide all of these mitigants, right, equity investors will also not step in. And once equity investors are there, once we give them the comfort, then I'm sure that the debt will follow, because they follow the similar rigorous, I would say, debt mitigation matrix, right?
Thank you, Sumit. Vishalji, let me just bring in. I think Sumit raised a very interesting point that can you really shave it off like 2 rupees, 3 rupees, 6 years? Is that a possibility for, I mean, you're operating Genmark, but what is your take on that?
In Ahmedabad, we are having a two transport authority. The one is Ahmedabad Janmarg, which is operating nearly 321 buses, and the other is AMTS, which operating 650 buses. Now, regarding that questions that regarding contract, we are all following the GCC contract actually, and we are getting a good result of GCC contract. As rightly mentioned by them, the GCC includes all the parameter. Apart from this, operational cost is also covers the depot infra and other electrical components also. So if you look at that overall scenario, then I would prefer that the GCC model would be the best compared to the net cost model. Now, regarding that penalty and all other parameter, but if you look at our experience, or if you ask any STUs the experience of the delivery of the buses, then we need to have such kind of things. I think we should not go with these things. But if you look at that performance and the delivery of the buses, then in GCC contract we should have such kind of provision. Now, one thing I would like to highlight over here is that in Gujarat state we are having a Chief Minister Urban Mobility Scheme. I think you have also mentioned in that presentation also, which is a good scheme, which gives the guarantee to the STUs regarding that operational guarantee. Because if you provide the operation guarantees to the STU, then and then STU will move forward to taking the electrical buses. Now, in that VGF scheme, we are getting 25 rupees per kilometer in electrical buses, in the 12.5 rupees in the CNG buses. In fact, we have also raised our demand to increase that subsidy. Now we are demanding the 40 rupees per kilometer in electrical and the 30 rupees in CNG buses. But if you look at that in STU perspective, we require this kind of operational guarantee, because just rather than providing a capex guarantee, it's not going to work. So we have also asked the central to think on that viability gap funding to the STUs regarding that operation guarantees. Because if you provide this kind of facility, then and then small towns and other semi-urban authority will attract to the electrical transport. And the third important point that I would like to highlight, that looking at the current scenario and maintenance side of the diesel, we should not go with the diesel buses more. Now the thing is that, because looking at the current experience of our Ahmedabad Janmarg, the operational cost and diesel CNG versus electrical, the electrical is far more better the solution. So that's why we are now focusing on the electrical buses only. So that's from AGL side.
I think what Sumit was mentioning about contracts, you can save few percent points. I would be happy. I think you must be having CSL contract, or you have any particular contract in mind when you said that.
Sir, I'm referring to all the contracts we've been part of.
So
all the
I am.
five
I can sit with you if you say, "Me, okay, this is the clause."
Yeah.
Because see, we have been, like as he said, Pawan, we have been talking about this for past 2-3 years.
Right.
But when it comes to actually changing, it
Yeah.
requires time.
Yeah.
So this is the language now, and if we change the language to this has the implication in terms of saving 0.5 rupees per kilometer, whatever.
Correct.
If you take a week, and after that, so when you draft a model contract, there is a model contract CSL is given, or model bid document.
Correct.
And so actually when model contract is being drafted, it's not only the bus manufacturer which are important, even the STU should also be consulted.
Absolutely.
Because ultimately without their payment, everything is in air. So I think if you have specific suggestions, and you can say, okay, 10% saving can be there, I will be happy to spend time with you.
Absolutely.
And then we'll work on this. I think there was one good point which was about standardization of charging infrastructure. And I was thinking we should also discuss rather than only listening, because if we can find some solution, it's worth spending time here. Otherwise, we'll have to keep on doing the same thing without making progress. So, as I understand, like each operator has its depot allotted, and then they set up a charging infrastructure. So in the night, 4 to 5 hours they take to charge the buses. I'm still not clear, like how this standardization or sharing of charging infrastructure will be helpful. But I think
let me just respond to that.
just a minute. Yeah. So that is one. Second thing is that since most of the buses they start early in the morning, like 6, 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock. So we have to see. But if it can be done, I think it can save some amount of expenditure on the part of operator, and it can reduce the cost of operation.
Yeah. Sir, I just wanted to respond to that. We are running 700 buses in UP, and as you rightly said, that most of the buses gets charged over the night, and in the morning they leave for the operations, right? So for the large part of the day, the depot is empty, right? And this depot has upwards of 20-30 chargers which are there, right? Now, apart from the adoption for the government side, right, the other thing that we've been talking about, there's a huge number in the private sector which is there. So for example, if we are running private buses also, now if let's say in Agra or in Ghaziabad, where we have an existing depot which is empty for the whole day, right, if we can allow private operators to come and charge the buses at the cost, or maybe like keeping a certain margin for the STU, it can become an additional margin. Plus it will also reduce the operating cost, because for a better utilization.
Did you mean that, or you meant like suppose this city was STU has STU has 3-4 operators?
Yeah.
So sharing amongst them, or sharing by private operator during the day when there is no.
Both actually.
Both are possible. So I think when you create a charging infrastructure buses, you have to also see, certainly the private buses can be when they are there.
Yeah.
But how for other modes and other types of vehicle, I think
the charges are compatible, sir.
Okay.
The CCS2 protocol, which is kind of standardized now, which kind of allows it.
Which I think STU should have no problem, because and I think it can be permitted.
In fact, in Ahmedabad case, I would like to highlight the one important point that sir has mentioned. We are having a 3 kind of buses. We are running JBM buses, we are running Tata buses, and we are running Ashok Leyland buses. 3 buses are a different technology. But as you rightly mentioned, that now we are focusing on opportunity charging, that is on-route charging. Now, if you provide the on-route charging to the operator, that will give you the comfort level to the operator also, and that will give you the comfort level to the authority also, and that will reduce the dead kilometer also. Now Ahmedabad city is now focusing on creating a on-route charging facility for the bus OEM only, right? And in spare time you can share it with the other private operator also. So this is where we are now.
Tell me on route charging. Now this is another question which was mentioned to me by STUs. See, when we bid for 180 kilometer, 160 kilometer, and actually once you put a bus in operation, you have to be providing that uninterrupted. Otherwise, switch over and all that actually delays the operation. But what some STUs told me that in the contract you say, okay, you will provide 180 kilometer, but actually it's not happening. On the ground, the delivery is less than that.
Yeah.
And that is actually disturbing the schedule of the buses. So what is happening that the operators are asking for 200 kilometers actually when they want to run only 180 kilometers. So we would like to understand from manufacturers and those who know the technology, that within what margin of error you say that you will be able to provide, and actually the penalty for those kind of faults should be higher. Suppose you are not able to provide 180 kilometer per day when I ask, and if you disturb my schedule, and actually the penalty should be up to 50%, because this pain can be experienced only by the person who is running the buses. You can understand there is a crowd, and if I don't put bus in operation, the crowd is going to shout at me, not at the bus operator, manufacturer. So I think what is actually happening, are we really, what is the data saying, like how many bus operations, how many buses we have in the market? Maybe 3,000, 4,000?
4,300.
4,300. So if you can do a study, and I think that will be very, very illuminating. What is the rated capacity of the battery, and actually what is it delivering on the ground? And I think the differences are there, but 2%, 5%, 20%, what is the difference? And if that reliability is not there, then I think so. I think when you discuss the contract, please also take care of this.
I need to continue so much. So just one second, let me bring other speakers. Ashish ji, you have heard about these challenges of financing as a crux. Wanted to share what's SBI's perspective on this.
From a lender's perspective, and speaking on behalf of all the lenders, first, the credit demand has been very, very robust since the last year. When we thought that it was basically a pent-up demand post-COVID, then slowly it transpired that all the sectors of the economy were basically firing up, and we were witnessing a lot of demand from all the sectors, and the matter got aggravated with the heightened rate of interest in developed economies. So we got corporates who were getting their cheap funding even after hazing from outside. They were looking inwards. Startups who had a credit crunch, they were looking inwards. So everybody started kind of looking inwards. Now, even at say 80,000 crore rupees in the last next 10 years, the volumes are very, very minuscule. The numbers are very, very minuscule when you look at the size of the credit, which is nearly 1,20,000 crore, just loans and advances. And investment is another 85,000 crore. 80 lakh crore. So that is the size of Indian banking in perspective. Now, when you look at the market, and I think Shumit, he spoke about innovative ways of financing and then bringing the equity perspective, and how a weak balance sheet basically handicaps the lender. So right now, most of the action is happening in the primary market, which we say you first approach a lender, and then the lender you seek either the fund-based capital, either term loan, and term loans banks are quite comfortable to give up to 10 years. So then you have working capital, which is rather small, and then there is a guarantee component which comes into the picture. So together, I think when you look at the balance sheet funding alone, it would be very, very difficult. One of the models that works in banking is multiple banking arrangement or consortium financing. Both are of course different. It's about how you source the financing.
Can I interrupt you for a minute?
Kindly, sir.
I think we would like to be very precise in the sense, the situation in which the bus operation takes place. So we have the deficit in terms of income. If there is no deficit, then everybody is happy. Then we don't require bank. Everybody will lend. Now so the income from bus operation is less than the expenditure. So when you lend, because manufacturers coming to you,
Yeah, definitely.
they are setting up some company, whatever, to procure the buses or transferring asset from parent to children, whatever you call them. So what is that SBI is thinking? What are your concerns in terms of lending to say JBM Group when they want to supply 1,000 buses to say Gujarat, or say 1,000 buses to UP Transport Corporation? What is the factors which you analyze? What has been your experience? What has been your experience? And what do you think is this sector is it the thing which you should be lending or not? And if at all you are lending, then what factors you look for and what guarantees you look for? That I think is, if you can clarify on those lines, then I think we'll have some information.
Thank you. I was just coming to that, sir. So basically, till now, the approach is on a piecemeal basis. It's on a case-to-case basis. So when we get a bankable proposition, we are definitely on. When there is not much clarity either on the STU front or on the manufacturer front, or the deficit financing can be very, very big, then of course as a lender, I'm not very, very comfortable. So that's why I was saying that why doesn't the sector look at the debt financing from a pool of borrowers rather than approaching a single borrower? When you go for a pool of borrower, when there is a multiple banking arrangement, every lender is kind of happy that I have a limited stake. At the same time, the due diligence is everybody's baby, and everybody is more comfortable that even in case of a default, things spiral down up to a certain extent only. As a single lender, whenever we lend, everything lies down with us, everything falls in our lap. But when you go for a consortium approach, basically things are looked from a collective angle. Now, second thing is from the primary market, it's there. Now, what about the secondary market? What about the securitization aspect? What about the syndication aspect? So, if you are not able to develop a secondary market where banks are happy to pool their portfolio and sell it to other. Now, one example, I think Seki, everybody was talking about, is very successful. Look at the real estate. In real estate, we started as a standalone. Banks were not very, very happy to give loans. Then HDFC came in 1977, and then today the market size is somewhere in excess of 30 lakh crore, because there are banks, there are NBFCs, there are private creditors, and everybody together is lending, and there is pass-through certificates. So when there is a shortfall, people go and meet the shortfall. So as a lender, I would be very, very happy if the sector could give a collective outlook. It could work out on the payment security. It could provide more clarity to me. And of course, balance sheet, if you are coming as a SPV, the balance sheet won't be very, very robust. It won't be very, very strong. So a very clear mechanism has to be there how in the next 10 years or so, a bank is going to recover its money.
I hear about the pool from multiple borrowers, and I would like to get back to you, Ashishji. But Laghu, let me bring you in at this point. What do you see the role of MDBs? Because I think that has been a very big discussion on how they can play a big role in the PSMs. But what do you see that how do we really unlock this?
Yeah, thank you, Bhavan. The Ranjit made a presentation initially, which we are talking about the money as high as 80,000 crore. Okay. So this kind of capital requirement, even if we need the government of India money and all the multilateral money, will not be enough. With my all regards to all the people who are sitting here. Okay. The only way this kind of a gap can be covered up based unless we unlock the private sector capital. Okay. So our effort is that at our level, what we are trying instead of a pure lending instruments, what we are working on a little alternative instrument where our each dollar can be utilized to unlock the $10 from the private sector. So we have this guarantee instrument, okay, which is much cheaper than the lending instrument, and where we are, instead of lending to the states, okay, what we are using is that we are providing the guarantee to the financial intermediary, okay, to lend. Basically securing the money which Mr. Ashish was talking about, the lending which they. So the whole message which I'm trying to convey is that we started with this demand creation of e-buses with a subsidy program. We have reached that level where the market has been created. Okay, now we have to come up with a models, much more alternate model where we unlock the potential of the private sector. Unless we do that, we will never be achieve these 80,000 crore or 100,000 crore. And now we are talking about 250,000 buses in the city. So whether we can continue with the subsidy scheme of any of the ministry, whether we can continue with the multilateral program, so typical lending program, I think those alternate instruments are required. So one of the instrument I talk about the guarantee instrument. Second thing is you were talking about the PSM. I think we heard from OEMs also. See, the whole concept of the PMM, and I really like what Sumit said. We are postponing the problem by 3 months and 5 months, but the root problem will remain where the states are not paying the money. States were not paying, state will also not pay after 6 months. So it's about replenishing the PSM. Okay, so we'll have to come back to the root problem where at a state level we strengthen Okay, so we have been talking about this, this you said earlier that this last 10 years we are talking about this thing. I think problem has not changed, be it electric bus or be it diesel bus. The states do not have the money. Okay, and if we create a PSM kind of a structure at a state level, the same state has to replenish the PSM who is not replenishing the escrow. So how would the problem will be solved? So alternate could be, which we are also working at a design stages, that bring the financial intermediary in between the PSM. Okay, when the states are delaying the payment, STU is delaying the payment. Okay, then operator can approach to that financial intermediary and find a kind of a short-term loan, which is supported by the guarantees which we provide. Okay, and unfortunately we have the instrument which gives the AAA rating, credit rating, to the entire entity, which is very reliable and which is very long term. So this kind of a mechanism can be created for 12 to 15 years, which is aligned with the concession. So these are the alternate instruments which we are working. So whole purpose is to unlock the potential of the private sector, bank like SBI or others, okay, which come forward to lend. Okay, so that's the whole purpose. And another thing which I would like to mention, I think, see, it's not that the first time we are doing the GCC. Okay, before electric bus also we were doing the GCC, but we never talk about this concept of PSM. Okay, there were discussion. Okay, there is a delay, but I think suddenly we talk about that payment are not being made. Let's create a PSM. In last 10 years, we never talk about, since 2009, where the first time Ahmedabad started the CCC. We never talk about it. But I think stakes are much higher. OEMs are doing those things which they never did. They are in the operation now. Other than the capital, there is a working capital, which is like, if there is a delay, the 6 month of working capital is stuck at its STU level. So I think that stakes are much, much higher than just manufacturing the bus and selling the bus. So that's become much more important. And probably it will be good to explore the alternates of the GCC also, where let's bring the banks and the financial intermediary who finance the buses, and this maintenance and the operation, these two functions can be further split. So currently what is happening, OEMs are taking the loan on their books, they are manufacturing, they are selling, they are operating, and they need the working capital for operation also. If we can split these three functions, the typical Latin American cities which they follow, the financial lease pool model, I think it's the time that we should now start exploring those alternate models also. Of course, while we may continue to work on the GCC, but that market also needs to be created. And I'm sure that may not be very difficult, since we have a very much mature ecosystem now, both at the national level, state level, and of course the OEMs level. We have now 6 to 7 OEMs in e-buses. This is a very positive aspect. So that kinds of alternate model, that market has to be matured, and we all collectively has to work on creation of that market. Thank you.
Okay. Two, actually, if you see GCC contracts for diesel buses, there is a role which is separate. Actually, bus manufacturers have never participated in GCC for diesel and CNG buses. It's only with the electric buses, because there are inherent technological challenges and the cost. Now, the maintenance of diesel and CNG buses are different in nature compared to electric buses, which everybody knows. So I think that's and you can verify there are many
Yeah,
contracts.
so those discussions are happening because the OEMs are now into party into operation.
No, because no, you have to see that the operator, why he should take the risk which he is not fully aware with the electric buses, and that's why otherwise what is the need? If you look at GCC buses for diesel buses, OEMs never participate in GCC buses, and even CNG, because anybody can repair diesel buses. Is it so easy to repair electric buses? There is a power train, there is a power management unit, there is a battery. You don't know how long the battery will work. All those factors are there. So certainly, when the technology gap is so much, the risk which is pursued by the operator is too much, and that's why operator did not participate.
Yeah, but we are talking about the financial risk.
Yeah, but you mentioned that intermediary will come only when the risk sharing happens. Now, I would like to know, you were telling about these guarantee instruments. So, can you elaborate some detail about, or some, like what kind of guarantee instruments you are talking about? I think manufacturers will be very interested in knowing about that.
Yeah, so I think the typical PSM structure, you understand, we talk about the SECI model. And the advantage with the SECI model is, since the power sector is a concurrent subject, so there is a tripartite agreement, which is not possible in case of bus, which we are talking about, because state is a pure bus is a pure state level subject. So I don't think any national level agency would like to get into the tripartite agreement in case of the bus operation. So that's how the difference, the first level of difference is there from the SECI model, which we are talking about. So what we are saying is that having a national level agency, let's say example is CESL, and create a PSM national level, house that PSM payment security mechanism at a national level, and that PSM will have a various sources, maybe a Government of India grant, maybe from other sources grant, lending instruments also from multilateral, but at the same time you would that further it can be replenished through the private sector banking. Okay, there will be a central bank, okay, and which will provide a letter of credit. Now the letter credit, how to maximize the credit worthiness of the entire entity. So World Bank especially has, I'm not sure about the KfW other agencies, but World Bank has this instrument called the guarantee mechanism. So this is different from the lending instrument. So where the World Bank AAA rating provide the guarantee to this kind of a banking system who is providing the letter of credit to this national level entity, that as and when there is a default by the STU, the operator will approach to the CESL or any national level agency, and this agency will ask this commercial bank to provide, issue the letter of credit again, issue the money against the letter of credit. So it's like a short term. If there is a default by the STU, because we are again talking about that ultimately STU has to pay from the left hand or the right hand, they have to pay. If there is a payment delay by the STU despite the disbursement, so then the World Bank guarantee will apply. Okay, so this is how it works, and it is much cheaper than the any kind of a lending mechanism or lending instrument of the any multilateral bank. Thank you.
Thank you, Lagu. Himraj, I wanted to bring you in. What do you think of a private insurance to address some of these concerns? I think that was something we picked up at CESL, which we were working with you, and we were exploring this. Do you think that's a possible way to really mitigate risk? And this is, I think, we're only talking about at the PSM, but also the bigger question of how do you lock financing at scale?
When I did that work over the course of last year, advising CSL, there was a working group created which had manufacturers, private lenders, the World Bank, ADB, and MIGA. Various people had various ideas, and insurance was one of those ideas with a way to address the financing. As Laghu has mentioned, the financing is so vast given the numbers we are anticipating that I would be the last person to say that there is one mechanism that will solve all problems. At the margin, insurance has a role to play, the World Bank guarantee has a role to play, but I must point out it needs state support. The MIGA guarantee has an insurance and payment security has a role to play, but that needs sovereign support. So, and what Sumit mentioned, and Sumit's business model is slightly different in terms of the fact that they're working with private sector and with intercity. Forgive me if I'm not 100% correct, but that's my understanding. The GCC format buses, the buses that are awarded and operating under the GCC format, I came to the view, for what it's worth, I'm just going to share my view, that everything else was marginal, including insurance. The fact is that the GCC itself was 27 to 30% cheaper. So when you go down from 70, 80 rupees to 47, 50 rupees, we've already done well. We are not going to go down to 30 rupees. No matter what we do, there is going to be a revenue gap. The way to deal with that, because the states can't fund that, they do fund it, they do pay it, but not on time. And that's why, in my limited understanding, the kind of project finance lending that is needed is not there. It will come with this payment security mechanism, and we should not be distracted by the marginal benefit of an insurance or a guarantee or a counter guarantee. You have to get the payment security mechanism backstopped, as Sumit says, by a TPA. Without the TPA, the payment security is irrelevant, because you'll be back to square one again. The TPA, with great difficulty, 29 states have accorded it for SECI, at least in principle. That can be done here. It will take time. It has, sir, been tested 3 times. Andhra Pradesh and Rajasthan, the carrot is not good enough. You need the stick as well. And the stick was put and the payments were made and it was replenished. So in that sense, I think that And the government has also been totally socialized with this payment security mechanism. It was discussed recently as well in the Modi-Biden discussions. It is under discussion, I suspect, under Morth. ASRTU, Mr. Suryakiran is not here today, is also aware of this because they could well be the nodal agency for this. So I think that is coming up, but I just want to state one thing very clearly, that you will not get the kind of financing we need if that gap is there, just like the power sector. So let's not look around at things that are good to have. Let's look at the must have. And the must have is a very standard, very basic 3-month escrow payment security backed with a third party arrangement.
Thank you, Himraj, for that very honest and candid inputs. Ravi, I wanted to bring you in quickly. Any thoughts that you wanted to share around this?
Yeah, actually, a lot of discussion has already happened on the bus procurement. I want to focus on the other investment needs that still need some external support. So, still the bus infrastructure, the depot infrastructure has to be built by the agency. If I look at BMTC, for example, so they have ordered for 1,300 buses. If they develop 13 depots, and so there are other requirements also. So there are thousands of crores of requirements still in the infrastructure side, which still require the STUs to raise finance from somewhere. So that's the typical infrastructure financing World Bank, KfW, ADB, they are generally interested in. What we see is that across states, I worked with several of these agencies, and to attract investment, so generally everybody says, yeah, it's a good thing to do. Nobody disagrees that bus investments are important, but first the MD has to be convinced, then the principal secretary, then the finance secretary and chief secretary, and people keep changing, right? So there is no vision that this is a 5-year program, and so we need to methodically invest in all of this. So that's where actually I would, Bagde sir is here, so sir, if you can provide some thought leadership saying that let's have a 5-year vision for buses, and all of you make a business plan and say this is my investment requirement on infrastructure operations, and then this may be VGF you have to put in. If you can't put so much, but put lesser amount, but you commit to it. But the thought leadership is missing, I would say. One. Second thing is, like Sumit was saying, everybody agrees that we need to reduce cost of operation. The focus on the other stuff. So like, for example, the conductor cost is so today the conductor cost is almost 25% of the revenue. So and there is not much effort in actually reducing the conductor cost. We keep focusing on bus procurement and reducing 1 rupee, 2 rupee, 3 rupee, and separately there is a 25 rupee cost that you are forgetting altogether. And there needs to be much more effort towards that, I feel. And the third thing is, so there is this Karnataka state committee that was formed. It's called One Man Committee. I was involved in that. I am the 0th man in that committee. So there was a focus on state level finance corporation, because now we are talking about thousands of crores of investments, but the current turnover itself is not so much actually for the corporation. So they are actually just not, they don't have the capability to handle such large investments. Just like we have Urban Infrastructure Development Corporation, Power Finance Corporation, so we need to have a Public Transport Finance Corporation also at a state level. When you're talking about big amount of money, you need that kind of capability to work on things. So there is a setup where you have a finance corporation separately for public transport, which deals with the multilaterals to attract investment, but then also provides the payment guarantees or other basically de-risking mechanisms at that level. So that's another topic I wanted to highlight. And the other thing about in-house capacity, actually, so when we talk about like the UBS, the bus specification that was made, or the model concession agreement, once you have a standardization, we are good at replicating it across states. So we need to have such standardization on so many other things also. So like the standard operating procedure for operations, service planning, just all the cadre recruitment rules. Who are we actually hiring into our STUs? So we haven't changed the cadre recruitment rules for so many decades, and the problems have changed, but the staff hasn't changed. So that's another big area actually. That's a national level thing we should take up, I think. Yeah.
Thank you, Ravi, for bringing this. Dr. Adit, let me bring you in quickly. We'll hear from private operators also. Yeah.
Right, sir. So I'll be very specific with your kind permission so that we can work upon the solution as you rightly said. As far as the SBI goes, there is a fleet finance scheme for transport operators at SBI. I am myself a customer to SBI at Nariman Point branch. There is a similar scheme with Bank of Baroda under the Super Strategic Fleet Finance Scheme, wherein we get bulk funding for various of our projects, diesel and CNG, wherever we bid as operators. Yeah, even for EV, if we can widen the scope of that particular policy at the banking level with the same, the parameters without, disturbing their credit calls or the quality of the credit, then I think it can get specifically workable. Very recently, we have seen bidders coming from the operator lobbies also, wherever the operators were allowed to bid as independently, like we used to do in diesel and CNG buses. In EV buses also, there are certain corporations where operators are very recently allowed. We have bidded. We are waiting the price bids to open. And if we are L1, definitely my first meeting would be at SBI and Bank of Baroda or Bank of Maharashtra, where there are already these schemes aligned. Just that the scheme needs to be widened with the EV parameters. The tenure is currently 5 years as per the CV loan policy for their this thing, 5.6 years to be precise. But it can be widened to 7 years, 8 years, because the EV contracts are primarily 10 years plus. So accordingly, it will become more competitive. Secondly, sir, specific to the delays caused by the PSUs, if everyone is disrupted because of that particular point. So if we can have a bill discounting arrangements also to take care of the working capital needs, and if we can have a certain amendments in Article 243W of Constitution of India through Government of India through your kind channel, sir. So in there, sir, there is a specific Schedule 12 Clause 7 where we can put certain policy level decisions where it gives much more comfort to the PSMs. And there is a provision, sir. If you read it, you will get to know where I'm coming from.
So thank you for those pointed inputs. Sayam, let me bring you in.
I don't want to talk about payment security because it's been talked so much. But along the lines of reducing cost, we are not thinking of increasing revenue. The biggest Achilles heel in all of these projects is we are procuring 9-meter buses, which have 50% the capacity. So you're reducing your revenue, while the cost of the driver, the cost of maintenance, the cost of fueling is not more than 20% higher, right? So you have to focus on bigger buses. That's the point of a bus, right? You have to take more people at once. So that's the VGF will keep increasing as we keep taking 9-meter buses, and the traffic will also keep increasing. So there we can increase revenue and sort of reduce the VGF gap. The second is, we are not looking at private buses at all, right? So there is FAME subsidies on 2-wheelers, there is FAME subsidy on 4-wheelers, there's FAME subsidy on 3-wheelers. Why is there no FAME subsidy on buses for private operators? Because this is 90% of the market, right? We are not talking about 10% anymore. So when we focus on that, right, if you can't provide subsidy because it's a big problem, then maybe look at residual value guarantees, right? So the electric bus has certain raw materials which can easily be recovered at the end of the contract lifetime. So if you can look at a 20% or a 30% residual value guarantee, that will give very good residual value guarantees to the banks, which means their model will be a lot more safer because 30% is insured, right? So the risk has been reduced. Of course, additional funding for charging infra is something that everybody's already talked about. I would like to point out what OSRTC is right now doing in their Lakshmi scheme. They have 1,600 buses being procured. We've been awarded the first 300 buses. These are diesel, but we can learn from there, right? So they are doing a sovereign guarantee, guaranteeing the OSRTC, which is the STU, that we will keep paying you for the next 12 years, which means the counterparty eventually becomes the state government, right? So all the banks that are local are very, very comfortable in funding these projects, and these are going to be 1,600 buses, right? We are looking at a similar kind of 800, 900 crore kind of a capex. So this is something that we can learn from, and I think that's all from my side. Yeah.
That's a very important point because if you see London bus operations, all their buses are big buses, double deckers, and the major cost is the cost of driver. So we think that those who are in the bus operation and those who understand bus operation, they will know that when to put big and when to put 9-meter and all that. But many people think that 9-meter is good. It's not like that. So it's like Mr. Vishal is there. So now WRI and other ASRT is not there. Why is not there? I don't know. But we should talk separately. I think there is much more need to educate the manufacturers as well as the STUs who are making the contract. Few days back we were discussing about the size of buses, and it appeared that 9 meter is going to be dominant size, and that I think is not correct. Depending on how many passengers at the peak time you want to transport, otherwise more number of buses for the same people would actually lead to congestion rather than solving the congestion problem. So I think this part of education, when STUs are in the process of augmenting or replacing their fleet, so we have to have and I think what happens is that only we meet when to discuss these issues. They look like very high level issues, but actually we need to prepare ground in much greater detail about how to operationalize some of the concepts. Otherwise you end up with a contract for 9 meter buses. There is going to be more losses, and it might to lead to more congestion at the peak time. So I think this part of ASRTU, you are there, some other organizations, we need to educate, like when they are bidding, what should be the fleet size and what should be the size type of the bus they should be bidding.
Sir, one more point there. We are looking at price per kilometer everywhere, right? And the bus range could go from 8.7 meter in length to 9.5 or 9.6. That is additional 20% size in the bus, right? Which increases your revenue, but you're only looking at price per kilometer. So when I am procuring as a private operator, I'm never buying the 8.7 meter because it's the same cost. I am procuring the 9.5 meter. So there is no focus given on how much square feet of space you have in the bus.
There is a focus because you can mention the number of seats, and then what happens if you mention the number of seats? Some of the manufacturers, those who are making 8.5 meter bus, they will think that they are being excluded. So I think this we need to understand what are the lengths of buses. I can understand 11.5, 12 meter. Then there is a 8.5 meter bus also. I don't know who makes. We need to find out who are making 8.5 and whether they can actually switch to 9 meter. So the size, rather than the type, low floor, high floor, standard, AC, non-AC, I think that's secondary compared to this size. At least have some uniformity and some common understanding size of buses. 9 meter, 12 meter, that's all. No 8.5, 10.5, and then they keep making rounds of STU. Please include me in 8.5. STU says no, I want 9, and then there are allegations of corruptions and all that. So I think we need to be data from all manufacturers. I think there are very few, 6-7 electrical manufacturers, and few of them are there, JBM and all that. I don't know what size, but I think we need to standardize this size: 9 meter, 12 meter. That's all I think, and 7 meter. Somebody was telling me today that they can make 6 meter. I said, why? There is already no. This is a real conversation that happened today. I said there is already 7 meter. Why are you making 6 meter? So at least we have a standard size, and I think we need.
Noted, sir. Vijay, I'll just complete at least. Vijay, I wanted to bring you in with this whole announcement of the US India on PSM, and where do you see this going, and what are some of the thoughts around that?
Thank you, Pawan. Sorry, I was here to learn the public bus sector, but let you give you a little background where things are. My agency is the Secretariat for the US India Strategic Clean Energy Partnership, and under this there is a pillar called Sustainable Development, and we have announced recently that we will be funding this 150 million to kickstart in the electric public bus systems. So I think it's still in progress, but there are a couple of points which we deliberated, discussed that how this can move forward. One is, like Laghu mentioned, that how we can leverage to bring more and more private investment into the sector, and that is not only the sector from the private sector players. It's also to look at some of the money and funding which is available from the sovereign funds also. The second option is that how we can build a platform. So building this platform will give an option for a lot of private sector players to come, equity investors who are looking at the sector, to invest into the sector, because EV is one area where we are getting a lot of interest. So two things: one is how we can leverage through some of the blended finance options, and put this money so that we can bring more and more private players into this segment. And two is how we can create this platform. The three stakeholders which we will be sitting with them is definitely, one is the industry, and the agenda will be how we can expand the base of some of these players in the sectors, including the charging infrastructure players, OEMs, and other service providers who can bring the operational efficiencies into the operation of this some of the buses where we will be funding this. Uh, Fourth important aspect, like you mentioned, is about the data. We want to drill down on the data, on operations, on like the standards what you mentioned, and what efficiencies we can bring in the operations when we actually move from discussion phase to the implementation phase, and where we will be putting this money around. The last important piece which we will be doing under this exercise will be to open all our GCC contracts and see that how we can again de-risk some of the areas and actually dissect those risks, sitting with the OEMs, operators, and some of the key agencies, so that we can at least see where we are putting this money to kickstart the sector. And the last thought process is that how we can share the best practices within STUs, like what are the learning of CESL, Delhi government? Is there a possibility to provide a platform to some of these STUs to drill down that what is best can be done in their state, and how we can leverage again the financing which we are providing to the state? Thank you.
Thank you, Vijay. Swati, I wanted to bring you in quickly on, you have heard a lot of thoughts, and anything differently that KFW is thinking about the whole electric bus ecosystem.
No, nothing much different, Pavan. I would say, in fact, it's good that I'm towards the end. A lot has been discussed, and I've taken note of certain points. But coming from a development bank's perspective, I think Laghu has touched upon majority of the points, wherein the national and subnational guarantees and sureties on financing and replenishing of a fund or a PSM fund kind of thing could be brought in, would ease out and also unlock funds and financing from other institutions as well. So KFW traditionally has been doing capex financing, you would know, and with India's experience in JCC, KFW also, to literally say, has unlocked its financing towards GCC and working with private operators as well. So we are currently exploring it with certain STUs and also with certain public sector banks as well as financial intermediaries to look on similar lines as Laghu mentioned, VGF, sureties, PSM, guarantees, et al. We have not done some of these instruments in transportation yet in India, so it will be a new thing to dive in, and we are looking forward to it. But apart, even if we do PSM and guarantee and all, a critical thing that we have been coming across during different discussions and deliberations with STUs is other level of reforms that would still be required at the state, not only for the STU but in the overall mobility setup as well. How good are the other mobility components of the overall public transport or transportation system of the city are gelled with this electric mobility component is really critical. So that's something which we'll be further emphasizing on besides the ESG component.
Thank you, Professor Narayan. I wanted to bring you in. You've heard all this. So, from a civil society organization and foundation, what do you think is the way forward?
Thank you, Pawan. I think almost all the points I have thought about would be covered by almost every friends over here. So, when it focusing on a business model becomes successful when it has been centered across simplicity, affordability, and would be focused on our core services. When I've been thinking about a transport sector or a public transport as a whole, one of their core services is that to provide a public transport in which we have to give focus on the operational efficiency improvement, which will helps to increase their revenue, and what could be the right, as sir has rightly pointed out, like what could be the standardization or specifications can be brought down, and how we can ensure that thing across the country. That is more important on that. Second thing, when have been focusing on affordability, like as PSM, we have already discussed about that thing. There is no more requirement or a discussion that has to be required, which is well known fact that that is something that has bring the reforms in the power sector. Like Seki have shown us the model. We have seen there are a couple of other models in different sectors also, between which we can bring the blended finance over there. Because as Shakti also, we have been working with the GAP on that fast initiative, financing advanced sustainable transport. Actually, how we can channelize the philanthropic money to support this initiative on with that. So in that context, the FAST has been acting like an insurance product, I would like to say, to support the PSM as a whole. So affordability is very much important. Affordability, when you have been coming across the affordability, we are all discussing about the buses. So there is a very much important point that from a lender's perspective, because from a State Bank of India's perspective of any multilateral banks over there, they would be ready to support an solar rooftop system in an bus depot along with the battery size. So is it possible we can disintegrate that? I'm just putting in thoughts on that. Like the through the SECI contracts, we have seen that there are a number of bankable projects on the 24/7 renewable energy projects. So is it possible we can make those kind of mini renewable energy projects in those kind of bus depots? Because the lenders will have confidence over there in providing the funding for the rooftop systems or for the battery energy storage systems over there. Which means that it will be ultimately there will be swapping. I know that there will be 100+ issues that has been related to the swapping. My friend would be Pawan would be more aware about that. So in short, I could share with an closing note like that. We have to focus on the affordability, but as well as we have to give core emphasis on the services, which will actually bring that sustainability in the ecosystem as a whole. That's my submission.
Thank you, Nir. Sanjay ji, Revati or Ronak, any thoughts quickly? Yeah, very brief. Yeah.
So,
two just
points,
one thought. Sanjay ji, very, very brief.
Two points just. Can we have infrastructure separate from the tender so that bus operators and OEMs, they concentrate on the buses, and infrastructure is supplied by a charge points operator, which can be common, which can have a shared as
Noted, yeah.
Second point is, so UBS 2 came in 2013 by your department. So why can't we have a UBS 2 modified version for electric buses? That specification issues will also be taken care of.
Fair enough.
Just one point on charging optimization. Currently, both opportunity charging and night charging are coinciding with the peak demands of electricity in the cities, and cities are paying extra cost. Discoms, because the EV tariffs are subsidized, discoms are buying electricity for 12-13 rupees and providing it for 4-5 rupees to bus charging. There is a huge loss that the state government and city governments are making towards it, and huge potential in terms of how we can optimize charging during non-peak hours to make the system more efficient. That will help reduce the operational cost of bus operations as well. Yeah, thank you.
Revati, anything you want to share?
I think all the topics are pretty much covered, but I'll just have a couple of points. One is largely, definitely, larger market needs private financing. That is the way to go, because we need like 50,000 buses. There's a large amount of demand that is coming in, but that is definitely the larger image. But when we are talking about larger deployment of buses, the bigger cities, Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, Pune, all of them have the funding and they have deployed the buses. Now if we need higher adoption, we need to look at the smaller cities. We should not have these financing strategies or funds to cope up with the operations. So definitely the subsidies have helped a long way, but when we are talking about the operations itself, we need bankable contract and contracts which have clauses for planning for e-buses. Right now operation is still on a CNG or diesel buses. We need the routes that are planned for e-buses operating from depots that are planned for e-buses. That definitely improves the operational cost. It definitely reduces the operational cost. And secondly, I really like to add the point of renewable energy, because there is a high pressure that is coming onto the grid right now because of large adoption of EV buses, and this definitely adds to the cost. We need to look at adoption of renewable energy, adding it to the grid, be it by the source of adding solar panels to the depots or whatever sources. That is one area that definitely will tap into reducing the operational cost for smaller cities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. I know Preeti, you're at the table. Anything? Okay, good. Ravi, last point, very brief.
Yeah, just 1 minute. So we talked about this consistent funding for STUs, right? So the reason, so that is a discussion to be had with the finance departments more than the STUs. So the way we try to do it in Chennai, where World Bank is supporting them for 1,000 buses, the key regulatory reform is this public transport service contract. So where the state is committing to consistent funding on a monthly basis. The reason why they agreed is this whole value for money. So they have anyway been subsidizing the corporation, but now we are talking about value for money, where there is a performance linked funding and there is an efficiency improvement target based on which this is given. So that's a model document that others can look at. Thanks.
Okay, Pawan, thank you very much for organizing this session. I think we had a good discussion, I must say, and we keep on discussing till we get more buses on the road. Discussion will certainly help. But I think we noted few points which are very important. I think we need to see how this standardization can be done and what actual changes can be made to the contract, which will actually reduce the cost of operation, what kind of support from state. Secondly, I think like bringing financial intermediary, that was the point emphasized. There is a scope if I think in OEMs agree to provide kind of a maintenance contract to the operator, and maybe then we can have that kind of arrangement which is prevalent in diesel buses. In terms of payment security, yes, but I think we need to understand that the length of contract and the kind of security requirements are there. It has to be long term, and certainly those who are buying the services, they have to actually pay on time, and that can only be the security. So we continue to discuss and hope to see more buses. Thank you.